Let's take an overview of HEG training, starting off with where we use HEG most commonly. The prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive center, is the area behind the forehead. It manages attention, your ability to focus, block out distractions, and stay on a task. It also manages your control of impulses to speak or to act, or even to have emotional responses, so that people think before they act. The ability for us to read social situations, to be able to tell how we're doing, and to know how to respond. Mood is managed in the prefrontal cortex. So the brightness of mood, that would be the ability to be positive and generally energetic, is related to prefrontal. Also, the ability to stay in a particular mood and not to swing back and forth is related also to the prefrontal function. Certain cognitive tasks, things like planning, organizing, motivation, even language processing, are very much related to prefrontal functions. The ability to project things into the future, to decide how we would get to a certain desired outcome, the ability to decide what the effect of something that we're thinking about doing might be before we have to make a decision, the ability to rank the options that we have in front of us in some kind of a logical way. Those are all prefrontal functions. The brain turns on the fight or flight response, and the prefrontal cortex is advised, goes and looks at the actual situation and decides, is this really a potentially dangerous situation? And it then has the ability to turn off the fight or flight response. Training in the prefrontal is also a terrific tool for working with physical problems as well. People who have migraines in many cases are very stressed or very anxious. So they spend a lot of time in what's called sympathetic state, fight or flight. When we're in that state, one of the effects on our body is that all of the blood from the extremities, the hands, the feet, and the head, move into the center of the body. When the person is able to relax and move back to parasympathetic, then what can happen is that the blood rushes back into the hands, the feet, and the head. If the system for getting that blood out into the tissues is not very good, the pressure of all that blood trying to get into the head and not being able to get out into the tissues is something that we feel in a migraine headache. The throbbing and pounding that we feel is actually the heartbeat. As we improve the brain's ability to distribute blood, that doesn't increase pressure, it actually decreases it. Things like strokes and aneurysms, which relate to excessive pressure, are minimized. When we train HEG with the nIR system, we really want to train 3 separate areas on the forehead in any session. We start at the left edge of the forehead, as far over to the edge as you can get before you go around the corner onto the temple. You do the same thing on the right side in the same place, and in the center directly above the bridge of the nose. Most of us have a valley that goes across the forehead from side to side. The headband for HEG should go in that valley with a white dot that you see on the front of the band over the area that we're training. Each HEG session should be done with those 3 sites in a different order. Rotate them. So it's very important that we not overdo the training. If we see those kinds of responses, poorer impulse control, more irritability, or headaches, those indicate to us that we're training too long or too frequently. I generally suggest that you train about 3 minutes in each site in the beginning. In some cases, we can see as we watch the HEG session that the client is now going down, and no matter how they concentrate, they can't raise the HEG ratio. When that happens, that's a time to stop. Some people can train for a minute, some people can train for 2, some for 3, some even for 4. But in general, I would start at around 3. And when a client has shown that he has the ability to sustain increased blood supply, then ease up to 4 minutes per site. The maximum that you would ever want to train would be 10 minutes per site. And usually by the time you're doing 8 or more, I would have stopped doing all 3 sites and just do 1 over the left eye, 1 over the right eye. Frequency of training sort of depends on how long your sessions are. If you're doing 2 or 3 or 4 minute segments, you should train every other day. As you start getting into longer sessions, when you get up to 5 or 6 minutes per segment, then I would go to once every 3 days. And if you get to the point where you're doing 8 to 10 minutes per site, I would probably do it once every 4 days or once a week. The best time to train is in the morning before you start your day. Worst time is directly after a big meal, because no matter how hard you concentrate, the blood's not going to move up to your brain. It's busy down in your intestines. Training at night is not a good idea because you're waking the brain up just before you're planning to go to sleep. You're going to be trying to improve your brain's ability to move blood into the tissues where the neurons are. And you can do that whether it's an ideal training time or not. Training environment ideally would be one where there aren't a lot of distractions around. Don't try and do HEG training in a room that has the TV on or that's playing music. You're trying to teach the brain to screen out everything and focus on a single point. And the more that you simplify the environment, the more effectively you're going to be able to do the focusing, which is going to increase the blood supply. Finally, the training task is single-pointed focus. I tell clients, don't think, that's inside your head. Don't try, that's looking into the future. Don't judge, that's comparing what you're doing now against what you think you should be doing. Just pay attention to a point. Close the focus in your eyes. Look at one thing instead of seeing everything in peripheral vision. It demands the most in terms of the brain's ability to produce energy. When you look on the inside of the headband, you'll see a little red LED, which is blinking on and off. When the headband is held against your forehead by the strap, that light goes through the skin, through the skull, hits the surface of the brain, and bounces back. The more red blood there is, oxygenated blood on the surface of the brain, the more red light comes back. As we increase the red relative to infrared, that's the ratio that we're actually training, we are increasing the amount of oxygenated blood that's available to the neurons in the area that we're training. As the prefrontal cortex focuses, blood is called into those tissues. At a certain point, the distribution system can no longer keep up with the demand, and you'll start to see the line go back down. What happens then is that the brain goes back into those areas where there were limits and builds new capillary beds. And the next time we train, we'll pass what were our old limits and reach new ones.